settlement agreement in the case of Westberg and White Incorporated versus the Sierra Sands Unified School District Board of Education. San Bernardino Superior Court case number CIVDS 1820532. And in item 2, the board took action to approve a settlement agreement to resolve a dispute concerning a special education matter. I will now call to order the regular meeting of the Sierra Sands Unified School District Board of Education, and will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by our Vice President Clerk, Mr. Rockwell.
Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We will now observe a moment of silence. Thank you. I would like to point out we do have our fifth member, Mr. Johnson, joining us electronically this evening. Item number 1, adoption of the agenda. Any changes?
No changes.
And we will move to item 2, approval of the minutes. If there are no corrections, they will stand as presented and bring us to reports and communication. Item 5. Reports by members of the board. None? I just would like to comment. I don't know how much of the different reports other board members have been seeing from CSBA over the last week by a lot of the things that have been coming down from the legislature. But it is clear that the focus on local control in school districts meeting the needs of their students is shifting dramatically, very quickly away from that philosophy and towards a more dictatorial and assigned method of governance, which I really feel is a mistake. I believe that local school boards exist for a purpose and for a reason, and have a stronger ability to respond to the needs of the students in our own district in the way we see best. And unfortunately, with the kinds of prescriptive solutions that are being given to us, they may be the perfect solutions for some school districts, but may not necessarily be the appropriate solutions for our district. Unfortunately, the dollars that are associated with those categorical programs are contingent on following the rules of those categorical programs. So it is what it is. But I say this because I believe it is one of our responsibilities as school board members to apprise the public to that challenge and to continue to apprise our legislators and those that do establish the laws in our state of California of what problems that creates for us, what kinds of gaps it creates for us, and the kinds of situations that students lose because of sometimes they're very well-intended categorical programs. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that this evening, so it really is something that's in front of us on a continuous manner. Brings us to item 2, the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris, and I echo those comments. I appreciate the highlighting the drifting away from the local control to, can you hear me? To more of a centralized, or what we call like a categorical funding. And I think we need to look very closely at that and analyze it continually and see where our voices can be heard to affect change. So I do have a report. I'll start with the the attendance report. In month 10 of our total enrollment, we were at 4,872 students. Last year this time we were at 5,100, so for the year we were down 228. I'll say Happy New Year to everyone, because in the public school world, our fiscal and our academic year is organized from July 1 through June 30. And so last month and time leading up to last month was very busy for us as we were holding public hearings and bringing information to the board for review and consideration, and then, of course, for board approval for our annual budget and our annual local control accountability plan. So now we begin to execute these plans, and we look forward to that as we welcome students in person to a full program of study on August 10. And speaking of in-person programs, we're very excited and gratified. We've had excellent summer programs for elementary students, middle school students, and high school students this summer. Our second block of elementary learning started this week at Fowler and Pierce Elementary Schools. Our extended school year, our special education services extended school year ran from the end of the regular year until last Friday, and they had a great program there. In fact, I got to sort of celebrate with them on Friday as they were running through some sprinklers, and there were hot dogs and hamburgers being served to kind of celebrate the end of the term. And then Burroughs High School, Murray Monroe secondary program finished today, and Ms. McClellan gave me some final counts that 2,130 credits were recovered. 5 students became summer graduates from the high school program, and then 5 students worked hard enough to recover a whole semester. So over 2,000 credits recovered is really good for us. And then I'll just kind of highlight some things for the benefit of the public. I sent a parent square notice to all parents and guardians yesterday describing the new independent study program availability and the details for how to sign up for that program. That's a new part of the trailer bill language, was a requirement to make sure that parents are aware that that is an available option for next year. I should say that many, part of the trailer bill of requiring that we have that, which we've had independent study for many, many years, but there are new requirements that have been established by the state for the particular rigor and expectations of that program, and how that program runs will look a little different than it has in the past. But any parents who might have questions about this, about what the program is about, or if they're interested in enrolling in the independent study program, obviously take the, it's not a survey, but submit the enrollment form that we sent to you yesterday, or if you just have questions, call the district office and we'll connect you with staff who can answer questions. This is important for people here in the audience and also those at home. And over the last few days, we have all been receiving information that's flowing from the state of California, from the Department of the California Department of Public Health, from the California Department of Ed, even some mixed messaging between Department of Public Health and the governor's office that has complicated the message that's coming from the state. And I know that parents have a lot of questions about it. And what I would say is that we in the district are very carefully analyzing all of this new and emerging guidance that's coming from the California Department of Public Health and from the governor's office. And what we are seeing so far, I'll be fully transparent about what we seem to be interpreting from this state information, is that masking among students and staff on school campuses will be required indoors, not required outdoors. And the rationale, we've been working hard on analyzing to understand this state information, and the express rationale by the California Department of Public Health is that it is their belief that the requirement of masking indoors is what will allow that agency to relieve all of the other safeguards that we had experienced last spring. So in my terms, my interpretation of the state information is required masking will allow for filling the classrooms, filling the cafeterias, filling the buses, and not having any particular distancing requirements, not having to have reduced capacity in the classrooms or the cafeterias or the playgrounds or the buses, being able to serve regular meals instead of prepackaged meals, and basically students and staff being able to carry on with an ordinary educational program without restriction, with the obvious exception of the indoor masking. And I know that new and emerging information from the state has caused significant response, I think, by communities and by parents and educators. And I think our job is to understand and interpret what it means, figure out, the extent to which we have local control and interpretation, and make sure that where there is no local control, that we understand that and that we implement it, but that we always have an eye on getting students into the classroom and on our campuses with the least restrictions and the greatest safety and comfort, so that students and athletes and musicians and artists can learn and have the best service possible. So like I said, we'll continue to analyze this flow of information that's coming down from the state, and we'll interpret it properly, and we'll do the best that we can, as always. I'll move on to just my last comment, that last year the board, these gentlemen up here and Mr. Johnson in the screen, took an action that was not required but obviously desired, and we adopted 5 guiding principles that helped serve as a touchstone, so that when we were making dozens and dozens of follow-on decisions with guidance and re-guidance and changes and adaptations, that that the district knew what our priorities are, and the district understood how we would best make operational decisions, is what I would say. And so I suggest that, in light of this last several days of the news cycle and information that's flowing from the state, I suggest that we look at maybe scheduling a workshop in August and allow the board to look at the 5 guiding principles which we had last year, which are, for the benefit of those in the audience right now, are the health and safety of students and staff, follow the law and take all reasonable steps to follow appropriate guidance, socialization and connection with students, provide nutritional services to our students, and optimize our means of educating our students. I suggest we give the board the opportunity to review those guiding principles, see if we want to affirm those moving forward, if we want to modify them in light of some new information and some new operational changes. And we look at that because the district greatly appreciated the engagement of the board members and your level of proactive interest in helping us determine the best steps to make sure that our local community is being served the right ways. So, and I appreciated that, and I continue to appreciate that. And with that, I think I have mentioned all that I wanted to in my report.
With that question and that recommendation by Dr. Ostash, do we have a consensus that that's something we feel might have value for us in the given circumstances? Tim?
Question, but yeah, I'd like to have a workshop.
Okay. Then it looks like we should proceed with that, Dr. Ostash. Thank you.
I will make those arrangements.
Okay, that brings us to the report to the Board of Trustees by the Desert Area Teachers Association. Do we have a representative here tonight for that report? If not, then we will move to item 4, report to the Board of Trustees by the California School Employees Association. Is there a representative here for that report tonight? Hearing none, that brings us to communications from the public. The board will provide time during the discussion of each agenda item for members of the public to comment. At this time, members of the public may address the board on items that are not on the agenda. Comments should relate to items of public interest within the board's jurisdiction. The law does prohibit the board from taking action on items that are not on the agenda, but if appropriate, your comments will be referred to staff for response. When addressing the board, please state your name and address at the podium and limit your remarks to 3 minutes. In accordance with the board bylaws, the board will limit the total time of public input to 30 minutes. Those wishing to address the board beyond that 30-minute time limit may do so at the end of the scheduled meeting agenda. So if you would like to speak, please step to the mic and give us your name and address, please. Seeing none, we will move to item 6, Education Administration, 6.1, approval of consolidated application for funding categorical programs 2021-22 school year. Ms. Decker.
Good evening, President Ferris, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Ostash, staff, and community. The consolidated application is used by the California Department of Education to distribute categorical funds from various state and federal programs to county offices, school districts, and direct funded charter schools throughout California. Annually, each local educational agency submits the spring release of the application to document participation in these programs and provide assurances that the district will comply with the legal requirements of each program. Program entitlements are determined by formulas contained in the laws that created the programs. The consolidated application must be reviewed and approved by the local governing board and by the District English Language Learner Advisory Committee. Signatures from committee members indicate that the committee members have read, discussed, and had the opportunity to provide input on the application being submitted and the applicable legal assurances. The winter release of the application is submitted in January of each year and contains the district entitlements for each funded program. Out of each state and federal program entitlement, districts allocate funds for indirect costs of administration for programs operated by the district office and for programs operated at schools. The following federal and state programs are included in the consolidated application Part 1 for application and reporting requirement purposes: the certification of assurances, application for funding, the LCAP Federal Addendum certification, the Protected Prayer certification, nonprofit private school consultation, substitute system for time accounting, and the Title III English Learner Student Program subgrant budget. The consolidated application Part 1 requests approximately $2,283,273 in funding for the programs listed below. The final funding allocations are received in the fall. For Title I, which is improving basic programs, it's approximately $1,872,674. Title II, Part A, is supporting effective instruction, which is approximately $238,083. Title III, which is our English learner funding, is approximately $37,370. And Title IV, which is student support, is approximately $135,146. The local control accountability plan must be submitted to the California Department of Education as part of the process for receiving categorical federal funding of approximately $2,283,273. It is recommended that the board approve the consolidated application Part 1 for submission to the California Department of Education.
Move the recommended action. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? If not, I will call for the vote. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Dr. Houck?
Aye.
Mr. Rockwell?
Aye.
Mr. Scott?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Makes it unanimous. Brings us to item 7.1, approval of revisions to the Administrative Regulation 1312.3, Uniform Complaint Procedures. Mr. Alt.
President Ferris, Superintendent Ostash, staff, and community. As the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, it's my job to review selected board policies and administrative regulations as a result of recommendations for revisions from the California School Boards Association. All proposed policy and administrative regulation revisions reflect recent changes in applicable state and/or federal laws and regulations. The administrative regulation is updated to correct the timeline in the notification section for submitting appeals to the California Department of Education as specified in state regulations. The section on investigation of complaint is revised to clarify that state regulations regarding the consequences of a respondent's failure to cooperate in an investigation only apply when the respondent is the district. It is the superintendent's recommendation that the board approve these revisions to Administrative Regulation 1312.3, the Uniform Complaint Procedure as presented.
Any questions or comments from board members? Any questions or comments from members of the public or staff, community? If not, we'll call for the vote. Pardon? Thank you. Minor detail. Have a second as well? Okay. Okay, Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Dr. Houck?
Aye.
Mr. Rockwell?
Aye.
Mr. Scott? Myself, aye. It's unanimous. Brings us to item 2, approval of revisions to Administrative Regulation 5141.4, Child Abuse Prevention and Reporting. Mr. Auld again.
The background information is the same, so I'll move to current considerations. The administrative regulation is updated to reflect a new law, AB 1145, which amends the definition of sexual assault for purposes of mandated reporting to not include voluntary conduct in violation of Penal Code 286, 287, or 289, if there are no indicators of abuse unless such conduct is between a person who is 21 years of age or older and a minor who is under 16 years of age. The regulation also adds licensed or licensees of licensed child daycare facilities to the list of mandated reporters, reflects that the California Department of Justice form is now titled BCIA, and clarifies that when a staff member or volunteer aide is selected by a child to be present at an interview where child abuse is being investigated, that the principal or designee inform the person of specific requirements prior to the interview. Lastly, it reflects a new state regulation which authorizes parents and guardians of special education students to file a complaint with the California Department of Education for safety concerns that interfere with the provision of a free, appropriate public education pursuant to 5 CCR 3200-3205, rather than through the uniform complaint procedure. It is the superintendent's recommendation that the board approve the revisions to Administrative Regulation 5141.4, Child Abuse Prevention and Reporting as presented.
Move the recommended action. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any questions by board members? Mr. Rockwell.
Apologize for not asking you this earlier, but there was at the beginning of the current considerations, there's discussion about changing some things along the lines of Penal Code 286, 287, 289. When I looked in the document, I didn't see any reference to any of that. What am I missing?
You mean reference to the actual penal code?
To anything linking to any of that discussion, I guess.
Okay.
I assume I'm missing something. I'm just trying to make the connection.
The issue was voluntary or involuntary, right?
Right.
I think I'm not too hung up on it. I was just looking for some clarification. I certainly trust the CSBA policy folks, but
Yeah, this came directly from CSBA, exactly word for word as they proposed it.
right. Okay. I'll read it again.
That answer to you. But
Any other questions by board members? Any questions by members of the public, staff? If not, I'll call for the vote. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Dr. Houck?
Aye.
Mr. Rockwell?
Aye.
Mr. Scott?
Aye.
Myself, aye. It's unanimous. Brings us to item 8, personal administration.
Move 8-1, 8-2.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for 8-1 and 8-2. I'll take the vote. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Dr. Houck?
Aye.
Mr. Rockwell?
Aye.
Mr. Scott?
Aye.
Myself? Aye. It's unanimous. Brings us to general administration, 9.1, appointment of student member to the Board of Education for the 2021-22 school year, fall semester. Dr. Ostash.
Thank you. That would be me. This is always an exciting one. In accordance with Board Policy Candidates have been selected to serve as student members of the Board of Education for the 21-22 school year. Student Hannah Osterman, Burroughs High School student, I should say, is being presented tonight for recommendation for the fall semester. Hannah just completed her junior year at Burroughs High School, where she participated in honors and AP courses, sports, and clubs. Her GPA was 4.81, and that's not a typo. Throughout her years at Burroughs, she has participated in varsity soccer, varsity tennis, robotics club, Key Club, and California Scholastic Federation. She qualified for CIF in tennis for the past 3 years. She was awarded League Player of the Year and League Champion. In both tennis and soccer, she was awarded the Academic Award for 3 years in a row. In the 2021 school year, she was voted into the second All-League team for soccer. She holds the office of Vice President in the Robotics Club and served as the treasurer for the Key Club in 2020-2021. She looks forward to serving as the ASB Commissioner of Communications this school year. There are no financial implications, and I recommend that the Board of Education appoint Hannah Osterman as student member to the board for the 21-22 school year for the fall semester.
Move recommended action. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments by board members?
So I made the motion, so I'm good with this. But again, we're doing this for just a semester, and so we just keep sliding back into our standard semester to semester to semester to semester approach when we've talked time and time again about something a little more sustaining or something with a little more meat substance. I'm not sure if it's overly appropriate to discuss it here, but maybe it ought to be, again,
I have a recommendation, because I believe the item before us is somewhat separate, but
Right.
but I think the relevant part is, does the board wish to have a discussion about how we view the student member and what we would like to see the student member evolve to? I was actually going to suggest under future agenda items that if that's a discussion we would like to have, that we book it for a future agenda and have a good, solid discussion about how we view a student member ought to participate and what we want to see in the student member, and then provide a role and opportunity to be successful in that role based on what that outcome is. I don't know what it will be, because it will be a group discussion, but yes, Mr. Scott.
We're talking about having a workshop in August. It might be a good time to throw it in at the same time. Oh, I'm sorry. Since we're having a workshop in August, might be a good time to throw it in the same workshop. As we've talked about this a couple times, we just had never acted on it.
So as not to convolute this specific item, let's hold that for future agenda, and then we'll take that.
Yep, concur.
Cool. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Just as a matter of interest, just today we got an email that there's a student board member training on August 11, and so there's just a number of things we can discuss. You know, how we develop the student member, the duration of the term, you know, how we integrate that student into his or her role on the board. I'm completely in support of having that discussion and making a determination.
I think that makes good sense. So on this item on the table right now, the approval of the student member, are there any comments or questions about this specific item? Any from the public? If not, I'll call for the vote. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Dr. Houck?
Aye.
Mr. Rockwell?
Aye, with apologies for fouling the process.
Mr. Scott?
Aye.
Myself, aye, it is unanimous. That brings us to item 2, report to the board, nature of resolution of complaints with regard to deficiencies related to instructional materials, emergency or urgent facilities conditions that pose a threat to the health and safety of pupils or staff, teachers, vacancy or misalignment as required by the Williams Act.
And I'm covering that one, by the way, Mr.
Are we
Aldhead.
good with just hearing if we had any issues or not? And if we didn't, we're probably okay?
There have been no reports of any Williams complaint issues.
Okay, and that is
I'm
just a
good with that.
report, so thank you for that report. That brings us to Construction Administration 10.1, report to the board, construction activities and issues. Mr. Coit.
President Ferris, members of the board, Superintendent Ostash, staff, and community, I'm pleased to give this update on the status of the district's construction activities. This report is presented for informational purposes and no action is required. This evening I will present a brief PowerPoint highlighting the district's summer construction activities. Oh, okay, well, we skipped that first one. So this is the Sierra Vista Center, and what I want you to be able to see here is, if you go by there in the evening, is we have the canopy lights working now. It's much brighter, much safer. And you can also, it's harder to see in this picture, but we have the underlayment for the new roofing in place, and next week we'll have all the shingles on that canopy. So we're moving along fairly well on that. This is just a view, kind of C&I office and some of that area and that corner. It's harder to see in this, but what we're doing here is we're separating the canopy and the buildings. So we used to have breezeway through there and all the canopies tied together, and during the earthquake the buildings were pulling on each other and pulling the canopy apart. So we're separating all the buildings, and there'll be gaps in the canopies going forward. This is the breezeway that runs north and south out towards Ward Street, and I will have a agenda item. What one is it? Oh, 10.4, discussing this, because we've got an issue there. This shows a little more. So this is looking up being on a lift, and you can see where the stucco has separated in there, so that wall's wanting to come down. So we've got that whole area cordoned off. The problem was, you can see plywood, and the next layer is sheetrock that was in there for fire rating, and the staples used to attach the wire to the plywood only went into the sheetrock. So as we pulled the ledger out from pulling the canopy down, this is the situation we've got. So I'll be bringing an item to you, 10.4, to remedy that. Vieweg fire line, we've been talking about this for a while, and again, it's a little hard to see, but the blue line is an 8-inch fire main, and that's coming down from Chelsea Street. The white pipe is a 4-inch future potable water line, so at this time we're only bringing in fire protection to the school. Sometime in the future, if we modernize that school or find the funding to get off of base water, then we've already got the potable water up to the school site. So rather than open that ditch up twice, it'll be ready to go. That's just our drawing we're working off of for that. It's a little hard to read. What you're going to wind up with is 3 hydrants. So our problem with this before was we simply didn't have enough water pressure, and the hydrants weren't in the right place. So now we'll have the hydrants where the fire marshal wants them, and we'll have adequate pressure for firefighting. J. Noble Benz is the contractor selected, and that's they're actually further along. That was yesterday morning, so I think we're just about down to the corner, about ready to turn the corner now with that ditch. So we're making good progress. Anticipate being complete by the first week of August. Murray lunch shelters. I actually took this picture this morning when the wind was blowing a little bit. They're not moving.
That's a good thing, right?
And so what we did is we put, they were grouped together in groups of 3, so we put a corner post on the outside corners, and then in between we put shorter posts that tie the shelters together. And so now it doesn't move, but it's one piece. And then the other thing we did on that is we sheeted the bottom. So it's built a diaphragm on the bottom also. So they're very stiff. It's 12-gauge metal on the bottom diaphragm. So we think we've got years of safe, secure lunch shelters now.
So in other words, in reference to your previous discussion about the Sierra Vista Center, this won't move in the wind, but when the earthquake comes, they'll beat against each other.
Let's hope we don't have any more 7-1s for a while, right? Okay. PAC Roof. So I just wanted to give you a couple pictures of what's going on up there. We've put on the new roof. As you remember, we had a project before you a couple months ago. We did a CMAS on the materials purchase and the labor. So it's about 95% complete. We've got a couple punch items. And then in about 2 weeks, we'll go ahead and put the coating on it. So you're looking at the top sheet right now, and it'll get a reflective coating. But we like to let all the product gas off before we put the coating on it. So that will be done by the end of the month, and the PAC should be ready to go. Just one more shot. I included this because right on the right-hand side is just about where it leaked before, and it would come down onto the stage and really make a mess in there. That was a low spot, and we've repaired the crickets, and you can see now that the drains are at the corners of the roof, and the slope actually goes towards the drains now, so we don't have any low spots. And I was hoping we'd have a thunderstorm the other day so we could test this out, but still waiting for that. So that was it for those items. Any questions?
Anyone have any questions? Any questions from members of the public or staff? Thank you so much, Mr. Coit. Brings us to item 2, report to the board on the private LTE project update.
That'll be me this evening,
Okay.
Mr. Ferris. So with regard to the private LTE project, we are happy to report that we have made it through the Division of State Architect, or DSA process, and that all 4 sites now have the necessary approvals to move forward. For the district office, underground work is complete. We're currently working on configuring the equipment and are due to start installation the week of July 26th. Installation is expected to take 2 weeks on that project. At Inyokern, the underground work is complete. We are currently working on configuring the equipment and are due to start installation the week of August 9th, and installation is also expected to take 2 weeks there. At the Fowler School build site, the concrete work for the new tower will start the week of July 26th and has a 30-day cure time. And then tower construction and equipment installation are scheduled to begin the week of August 30 and are expected to take 2 weeks to complete. And then lastly, Las Flores School, we are currently working on configuring the equipment. Underground work and installation are due to start the week of August 9th, and installation is expected to take 2 weeks. So a lot of progress in this project.
Any questions from board members on that project?
Just one that struck me. So we're starting the Las Flores work the week of, the 9th, which is the day before we start school. Is that on the southwest corner of the campus? So it'll be away from where
Southwest,
students...
west. Yes. Well, you know what's funny? Mr. Morrison, in an email to me, said, by the way, if anyone asks a question about coordination of work and students, they have a plan for working around ingress and egress of students and different hours and such. So we are well aware of the August 10 start for students, but the contractors and subcontractors have a work schedule for that.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Questions from staff or community? Okay, thank you for that report. That brings us back to Mr. Coit on item 3, approval of contract with BSK Associates for geotechnical engineering investigation of the proposed site for the new Richmond Elementary School.
The district is anticipating a grant from the Department of Defense, Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation for replacement of the Richmond Elementary School. In March 2020, the district issued a request for qualifications for geological engineering services. BSK was selected to provide these services for the entirety of the project. The district contracted with BSK Associates for the preliminary geotechnical investigation to facilitate site selection for the new school. It is now necessary to perform further geotechnical engineering investigation of the proposed site in support of the project. The current considerations: the district received a proposal from BSK Associates for the geotechnical engineering investigation. The objective of this investigation is to assess soil conditions and to provide an assessment of the bearing conditions of the site. The investigation will consist of field exploration, laboratory testing, engineering analysis, and a final report summarizing findings and recommendations. The financial implications: the proposed price for these services is $28,400. It is anticipated that 80% of these costs will be reimbursed by DoD grant funds, and the remaining 20% will be funded by Fund 40, Capital Facilities Fund. It is the superintendent's recommendation that the board approve the contract with BSK Associates for geotechnical engineering investigation of the proposed site for the new Richmond Elementary School as presented.
Move recommended action.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions by board members? Dr. Houck? No? Any questions by staff or community? If not, we'll call for the vote. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Dr. Houck?
Aye.
Mr. Rockwell?
Aye.
Mr. Scott?
Aye.
Myself, aye. It is unanimous. Brings us to item 4, authorization to approve an agreement with Plasterworks Incorporated for earthquake repairs of Sierra Vista Educational Center. Sorry, my screen went blank for a second there.
Sorry. Put these glasses on, I can't see anything. On April 15th, 2021, the board approved an agreement with several companies to perform earthquake repairs to the Sierra Vista Education Center exterior canopy. Construction began on this project in May 2021. The process of removing damaged wood connecting the canopy to the main building, the stucco facing several walls deteriorated. It is now necessary to remove and replace the stucco. The current consideration under Public Contract Code 22032, paragraph A, states that public projects of $60,000 or less may be performed by a negotiated contract without formal bidding. The district received a quote from Plasterworks, Inc. for the necessary stucco repairs. The cost of this agreement is $59,500. It is anticipated that 75% of this funding will be reimbursed by the California Office of Emergency Services. The remaining 25% will come from Fund 40, Capital Facilities Fund. It is the superintendent's recommendation that the board authorize the district to approve an agreement with Plasterworks, Inc. as presented.
Move the recommended action.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions from board members?
I just have one question.
Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Are we restuccoing the whole wall or just patching that little 1 foot space?
So in the picture that I showed, it's the two walls between the breezeway that runs north and south.
Right.
And those walls will be replastered. All the plaster will come off.
The entire wall then?
Yes.
Okay. That seems reasonable for that cost then. Thanks.
Any other questions, board members? Any questions, staff and community? If not, we will call for the vote. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Dr. Houck?
Aye.
Mr. Rockwell?
Aye.
Mr. Scott?
Aye.
Myself? Aye. It's unanimous. That brings us to item 5, approval to enter into an agreement with Colombo Construction for construction management services for various projects in the district. Mr. Coydigan.
The district has several construction and deferred maintenance projects tentatively planned for the 2021 through 23 school years. Due to the number of projects that will be in progress simultaneously and the complexity of several of the projects, district staff feels it would be prudent to have a construction management firm under contract to support the district on an as-needed basis. The district issued a request for qualifications for CM services for various projects that may be undertaken by the district. The district received 2 responses to the RFQ, with Colombo Construction being selected as the most qualified to meet the district requirements at the lowest cost. The Colombo proposal provides for 2 fee structures. 1, a percentage of the total cost, 2 hourly rates. There will be no cost to the district until specific projects have been initiated. The cost of these services will depend on the total project cost, percentage-based or hours, necessary to perform services. The district will select the fee structure most advantageous to the district for each project. Funding will be aligned to the source of funding for the specific project being supported. Fund 14, Deferred Maintenance, or School Facilities Fund. It is the superintendent's recommendation that the board approve the agreement with Colombo Construction as presented.
Move to recommend action.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions by board members? Questions by members of the public or staff? If not, we'll call for the vote. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Dr. Houck?
Aye.
Mr. Rockwell?
Aye.
Mr. Scott?
Aye.
Myself, aye. It is unanimous. That now moves us to Business Administration. 11.1, Mrs. Smith, approval of an agreement with Vieweg Corporation to purchase electric bus charging stations.
Good evening, President Ferris, members of the board, Superintendent Ostash, community, and staff. In April of 2020, the Director of Transportation initiated a proposal to convert 15 home-to-school transportation diesel buses to electric over the next 8 years. Justification for this included the probable lack of grant funding for diesel buses over the next several years and increasing reliability issues associated with the diesel bus fleet due to increasing emission standards. In November 2020, the board approved Resolution number 15-2021, authorizing the district to seek grant funding from the Eastern Kern Air Pollution Control District for 2 electric buses. On April 26, 2021, the board conducted a construction workshop to review a proposed plan and estimated costs associated with the procurement of 15 electric buses and the associated charging infrastructure. On May 20th, 2021, the board approved an agreement with Southern California Edison for their Charge Ready Transport program and the no-cost installation of the infrastructure necessary for a bus charging yard. Under the terms of the agreement with SCE, the district must purchase and install 15 approved electric bus charging stations. SCE has a rebate program that will reimburse the district for 50% per unit. The district obtained quotes from Blink and Nuvi for the charging stations. Nuvi was selected as lowest bidder and for the fact that the software necessary to use the chargers is included in that procurement. The agreement includes chargers, pedestals, and a 5-year software contract. The cost for this purchase is $60,750 for the quote, and then we expect a rebate of $16,500 from SCE for the chargers, for a total of $44,250. Funding for this purchase will come from Fund 01 General Fund. It is the superintendent's recommendation that the board approve an agreement with Nuvi to purchase the electric bus charging stations as presented.
Move recommended action.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments from board members?
My only comment is I didn't see any Tesla superchargers in the installation plan here. I'm a little disappointed. But
You're in the dark, buddy.
other than that,
Any other questions or comments from board members? Questions or comments from members of the public or staff? We will call for the vote. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Dr. Houck?
Aye.
Mr. Rockwell?
aye.
Mr. Scott?
Aye.
Myself, aye. It is unanimous. We will now temporarily adjourn the meeting of the Sierra Sands Unified School District Board of Education to convene the meeting of the Inyo Kern Schools Financing Authority. And if there are no changes to the agenda, it will be adopted as presented. And if there are no changes to the minutes, they will stand as written. And we'll move into the consent calendar.
Move entire consent calendar.
Second.
Consent calendar has been moved and seconded. Any questions? All in favor say individually. One of these days we'll have everybody here. We'll actually get to take a vote like that, huh? Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Dr. Houck.
Aye.
Mr. Rockwell.
Aye.
Mr. Scott.
Aye.
Myself, aye. It is unanimous. Okay, that brings us to the consent calendar for the, we will adjourn the meeting of the Inyo Kern Schools Financing Authority and reconvene the meeting of the Sierra Sands Unified School District Board of Education, which now brings us to the consent calendar.
Move entire consent calendar.
Consent calendar has been moved and seconded. We'll take a vote. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Houck?
Aye.
Mr. Rockwell?
Aye.
Mr. Scott?
Aye.
Myself, aye. It is unanimous. And that brings us to item 14, future agenda items.
I think we should have a conversation about doing something more with the student member than we have in the past.
You are.
And this time actually do something about it.
Okay, do we have consensus that that's a topic we would like to do? Chad? Tim?
I didn't hear what Mr. Rockwell wanted.
Okay. Then we will see that gets put on our next agenda. And that brings us to item 15, which is adjournment. Thank you so much for joining us here this evening. And have a good evening.